The crowd outside the Manhattan Federal Courthouse roared as Emily Matthews stepped onto the rain-soaked steps, her 5-year-old son clutching her hand. Flashbulbs erupted like lightning as reporters thrust microphones toward her face. "How does it feel to bring down America's most ruthless billionaire?" Someone shouted. Emily's eyes, once dulled by humiliation, now blazed with quiet triumph as she watched Richard Thompson being escorted into a police vehicle, his empire shattered, his reputation in ruins. 6 months earlier, she had been just another invisible pregnant waitress, forced to swallow her dignity for tips, while men like Thompson treated her like garbage beneath their Italian leather shoes. That night, as she wiped away tears in the employee bathroom of the Sovereign, her hands trembling with rage and shame, she had made a decision that would change everything, not just for her, but for thousands of working women across America. "They never see us coming," Emily whispered to her son as cameras captured the moment for the evening news. "They think our desperation makes us weak." She placed a protective hand over her son's ears before finishing her thought. "But they forget. A mother with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous force on earth." Before we start this exciting story, drop in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd love to give your comment a little heart. Now, let's begin this emotional journey. The April rain poured down on Manhattan's Upper East Side, creating reflective pools on the asphalt that mirrored the glittering lights of the Sovereign restaurant. Emily Matthews adjusted her uniform, a black dress with a carefully designed cut that, so far, had managed to conceal her 6-month pregnancy from the restaurant's elite clientele. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar ache in her lower back that had become her constant companion. "You okay, Em?" Sarah, her closest friend at work, squeezed her shoulder as they stood in the employee entrance. "You look beat." "Just the usual," Emily replied, forcing a smile. "Noah was up half the night with a fever, and then the babysitter called in sick this morning." She didn't mention the mounting medical bills or the second notice on her rent that had arrived yesterday. The Sovereign's generous tips were the only thing keeping her afloat since Tom had walked out after learning about the pregnancy. Sarah frowned. "You should be on maternity leave by now, not running around carrying trays." "And live on what exactly?" Emily laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Besides, Kevin would replace me in a heartbeat." Their manager had made it abundantly clear that pregnant waitresses didn't fit the Sovereign's image. The restaurant was a symphony of luxury, crystal chandeliers hanging from coffered ceilings, tables draped in Egyptian cotton, and cutlery that cost more than Emily's monthly rent. The wealthy patrons who frequented the Sovereign didn't come just for the food. They came to be seen, to make deals, to flaunt their status. "Heads up," Sarah whispered. "Table 7. He's back." Emily's stomach tightened as she glanced toward the table. Richard Thompson, tech billionaire, notorious tipper, and according to the restaurant grapevine, an absolute nightmare to serve. His companies were constantly in the news for cutting-edge innovations, but among service staff across New York, he was infamous for his entitled behavior. "Emily!" Kevin's voice cut through her thoughts. The restaurant manager approached with the practiced smile he reserved for servers before delivering bad news. "I need you to take Mr. Thompson tonight. Megan called in sick." "Kevin, I've been on double shifts all week. Can't Mark handle it?" She knew the answer before he shook his head. "Thompson specifically asked for our most experienced server." "That's you." Kevin lowered his voice. "He's dining with potential investors. The bill could hit 5 figures tonight. Whatever he wants, he gets." Emily's eyes drifted to Thompson's table. He sat with the confident ease of a man accustomed to having the world bend to his will, tailored suit, perfectly coiffed silver hair, surrounded by 3 other men in similar attire who laughed a little too loudly at whatever he was saying. "Fine," she conceded, knowing resistance was futile. "But I finish at 10, no exceptions. Mrs. Chen can't watch Noah past 10:30. Kevin nodded absently, already walking away. "And Emily," he called over his shoulder, "button up your cardigan. We don't want to, you know." He gestured vaguely. At her midsection, Emily felt heat rise to her cheeks as she adjusted her clothing, making sure her pregnancy remained invisible. 6 more weeks, she told herself. 6 more weeks of hiding, of smiling through backaches and swollen ankles, of pretending she wasn't growing a human being while catering to people who spent more on a bottle of wine than her monthly grocery budget. As she approached Thompson's table, she plastered on her professional smile, the one that had earned her promotions and regular customers over 5 years at the Sovereign. "Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Emily, and I'll be taking care of you. "Tonight, may I start you with some cocktails or perhaps a bottle of wine?" Thompson barely looked up from his menu. 18-year Macallan for the table. Not a question, a statement. "And bring us the chef's tasting menu with the premium wine pairing." Still not making eye contact. "Excellent choice, sir. The chef has prepared an exceptional 7-course experience tonight." Emily continued her well-rehearsed spiel, describing the evening's specialties with practiced enthusiasm. It was only when she reached for Thompson's water glass to refill it that she slightly miscalculated, her changing center of gravity causing her to lean forward more than intended. Her cardigan shifted, revealing the subtle curve of her pregnancy. Thompson's eyes flickered to her midsection, then to her face, his expression changing from indifference to something else, something that made Emily's skin crawl. "Is there something else I can get for you, sir?" she asked, trying to redirect his attention. A cold smile spread across Thompson's face. "Actually, there is." He leaned back in his chair, addressing his companions loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Gentlemen, this is why I prefer establishments with better hiring standards. In Europe, they understand the importance of aesthetic consistency." Emily froze, feeling eyes from surrounding tables turn toward her. "Tell me," Thompson continued, his voice dripping with false concern, "should you really be on your feet in your condition? Carrying heavy trays? Seems like a liability issue to me." He turned to the man on his right. "Don't you agree, James? We're one drop tray away from a lawsuit." The men at the table chuckled uncomfortably, caught between wanting to please Thompson and recognizing the cruelty of his comments. "I assure you, sir, I'm perfectly capable of doing my job," Emily replied, her voice steady, despite the humiliation, burning through her. Thompson took a deliberate sip of water. "I suppose we'll see about that. Run along now and get our drinks." Carefully. As Emily walked away, she could feel her cheeks burning and the stares of other diners following her. In the kitchen, she braced herself against the counter, taking deep breaths to calm the storm brewing inside her. Sarah appeared at her side. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Thompson," Emily whispered. "He noticed this." She gestured to her belly, made a whole scene about it. "That bastard," Sarah hissed. "Want me to accidentally spill something on his overpriced suit?" Despite everything, Emily laughed. "And get yourself fired? Not worth it." She straightened up. "I've handled worse. It's just 3 more hours." But as she arranged the expensive whiskey on a silver tray, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was going to be different. Something in Thompson's eyes, that calculating cruelty, told her this was just the beginning. The rain continued to pour outside, drowning out the city noise. Inside the Sovereign, under the warm golden lights, Emily squared her shoulders and lifted the tray. Whatever Thompson had in store, she would endure it. She had no choice. With bills piling up and a son depending on her, dignity was a luxury she couldn't always afford. What she didn't know then was that this night would change everything, not just for her, but for thousands of women like her across the country. The storm outside was nothing compared to what was coming. Emily returned to Thompson's table with practiced grace, carefully setting down the expensive whiskey in front of each man. She could feel Thompson's eyes following her every move, like a predator tracking wounded prey. "So," Thompson said as she finished serving, his voice loud enough to carry to neighboring tables, "how far along are you exactly?" 7 months? 8. Emily's hand trembled slightly. "Will there be anything else with your drinks, gentlemen?" Thompson ignored her question. "I asked you a personal question. The customer is always right. Isn't that the saying?" His companions shifted uncomfortably, but Dunn intervened. 6 months, sir," Emily answered quietly, hoping her compliance would end his interest. 6 months, Thompson exclaimed with exaggerated surprise. "And still waiting tables at a fine dining establishment. Fascinating life choices." He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. The father must be very progressive to allow that. Emily felt as if she'd been slapped. The absence of Tom, who had blocked her number after suggesting she take care of the problem, was a wound still raw and bleeding. "Your first course will arrive shortly," she managed, turning to leave. "I wasn't finished," Thompson said sharply. "It's considered rude to walk away when someone is speaking to you. Didn't your parents teach you basic manners?" Every instinct told Emily to keep walking, but she couldn't afford to lose this job. Slowly, she turned back. "My apologies, sir." Thompson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's better. Now, I'm curious. Do you find that your condition affects your tips? I imagine most patrons at an establishment like this expect a certain aesthetic experience. Heat rose to Emily's face as several diners at nearby tables pretended not to listen. I provide excellent service regardless of my personal circumstances, Mr. Thompson. Admirable, if somewhat delusional, Thompson replied. James here runs several restaurants on the West Coast. Perhaps he should implement a policy. What would you call it, James? A visual consistency requirement? James, a balding man with an expensive watch, laughed nervously. Richard, perhaps we should discuss the investment opportunity in a moment. Thompson waved him off. I'm conducting an impromptu focus group, valuable customer insights. He turned back to Emily. Tell me honestly, wouldn't you be more comfortable in a different line of work, something more suitable for your condition? Each word was a needle, precisely aimed to draw blood. Emily stood frozen, caught between professional requirements and basic dignity. The chef has prepared a special amuse-bouche to complement your whiskey, she said, desperately trying to redirect the conversation. I see subtlety isn't your strong suit, Thompson sighed dramatically. Let me be direct then. Women in your condition belong at home, not serving me my dinner. Your presence is distracting, unappetizing even. The restaurant seemed to go silent, though Emily knew it was just the blood rushing in her ears. 20 feet away, she saw Kevin watching, his face a mask of professional neutrality despite the public humiliation of his employee. I apologize. If my appearance offends you, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper, I can ask another server to attend to your table. And now you're refusing to serve us? Thompson's voice rose, drawing even more attention. Shocking service at these prices. No, I simply thought, you're not paid to think, Thompson cut her off. You're paid to serve, so serve. He emptied his glass and held it out expectantly. As Emily reached for it, Thompson continued, though I must say it's refreshing to see someone of your station embracing traditional values, having the baby despite clearly being ill-equipped to provide for it. Very noble, very quaint. Something inside Emily cracked. The weight of months, of Tom's abandonment, of hiding her pregnancy, of working double, shifts with swollen feet and an aching back, of counting pennies while serving $500 bottles of wine, crystallized in this moment of purposeful cruelty. Actually, she said, her voice surprisingly steady, I find my station in life allows me a perspective you seem to lack, Mr. Thompson. The ability to recognize human dignity regardless of circumstances. Thompson's eyes narrowed dangerously. Careful, sweetheart. That sounded suspiciously like insubordination. Not at all, Emily replied. Just answering your question thoroughly, as good service dictates. Thompson stared at her for a long moment before his face broke into a cold smile. Well, gentlemen, it seems we've found a rare specimen, a waitress with opinions. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, extracting several $100 bills. Here's a special tip just for you, for prenatal vitamins or whatever. It is your type needs. He tossed the money onto the floor at Emily's feet. The restaurant went completely silent. Emily looked down at the scattered bills, then back at Thompson's smug face, surrounded by his uncomfortable but silent companions. 5 years of suppressed rage and accumulated indignities roared through her veins. With deliberate slowness, Emily set down her serving tray. Keep your money, Mr. Thompson. I may serve food for a living, but that doesn't make me your servant. She turned and walked away, leaving the bills scattered on the floor. Behind her, she heard Thompson's incredulous laughter, followed by, Kevin, I need to speak to a manager immediately about your staff's behavior. In the kitchen, Emily's professional composure finally shattered. Tears blurred her vision as Sarah rushed to her side. What happened out there? Before she could answer, Kevin burst through the doors, his face contorted with anger and panic. What the hell was that? Do you have any idea who that man is? A cruel, entitled bully, Emily suggested, wiping her eyes. He's our biggest VIP. His table spends more in one night than most do in a month. Kevin ran his hands through his hair. He's demanding I fire you on the spot. For what? Not picking up money he threw at me like I'm some kind of... For insubordination. For embarrassing him in front of his business associates. Kevin lowered his voice. Emily, you know your situation isn't ideal for front of house. I've been accommodating, but this... Accommodating? Emily echoed in disbelief. I've worked double shifts at 6 months pregnant without complaint. I've hidden my pregnancy to protect your precious restaurant aesthetic, and you're taking his side. Kevin's expression hardened. This isn't about sides, it's business. Go home, you're done for tonight. We'll discuss your future here tomorrow. As Emily changed out of her uniform with trembling hands, the full weight of what had just happened crashed down on her. She had stood up to Thompson, but at what cost? The job she desperately needed hung by a thread. Noah's medication, their rent, everything depended on her income. Yet beneath the fear, something else was taking root. A burning sense of injustice that wouldn't be easily extinguished. Whatever tomorrow brought, Emily knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was done being invisible. The subway ride home felt endless. Emily sat alone in the near-empty car, the fluorescent lights harsh against her pale skin. She had left the sovereign through the back entrance, avoiding Sarah's concerned gaze and the prying eyes of co-workers who had undoubtedly heard about the incident by now. The scattered bills Thompson had thrown at her feet seemed to burn through her memory. $100 bill here, a 50 there, tossed carelessly like scraps to a dog. Rain pelted the windows as the train lurched between stations. Emily pressed her forehead against the cool glass, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. The baby kicked, a small flutter of life reminding her of everything at stake. "What am I going to do?" she whispered to no one. If Kevin fired her tomorrow, and all signs pointed to that outcome. She had enough savings for maybe 2 weeks of rent and groceries. The medical bills for Noah's chronic asthma already had her drowning in debt, and the cost of prenatal care wasn't helping. The train screeched to a halt at her stop in Queens. Emily dragged herself up the stairs to the street, the midnight air, heavy with moisture, 3 blocks to Mrs. Chen's apartment, where Noah was hopefully sleeping soundly. 3 blocks to contemplate how quickly life could unravel. Mrs. Chen opened the door before Emily could knock, her weathered face creased with concern. "You late," she said quietly. "Everything okay?" "Just work running long," Emily lied, forcing a smile. "How's Noah?" "Sleeping now. Had little cough earlier, but medicine helped." Mrs. Chen stepped aside to let Emily in. "You look terrible. Sit. I make tea." Emily wanted to refuse, to just grab Noah and retreat to their tiny apartment across the hall, but Mrs. Chen was already shuffling to her kitchen. The elderly woman had been a godsend since Tom left, watching Noah for next to nothing when Emily worked late shifts. In the dimly lit living room, Noah slept on the pull-out sofa, his small chest rising and falling beneath a hand-knitted blanket. At 5 years old, he was already too serious, too aware of their precarious circumstances. He never complained when dinner was just rice and beans again, or when they couldn't afford new shoes for school. Mrs. Chen returned with 2 steaming cups. "Drink. Good for baby." Emily accepted the tea gratefully, its warmth spreading through her cold fingers. "Thank you for watching him so late." "No problem, he good boy." Mrs. Chen studied Emily's face. "You crying?" Eyes red. The simple question nearly undid her. Emily bit her lip hard, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. "Just tired." Mrs. Chen wasn't fooled. "Money problems worse?" "I might," Emily's voice caught. "I might lose my job tomorrow." "Why?" "You hardest worker I know." How could she explain what had happened? The casual cruelty, the public humiliation, the impossible choice between dignity and survival. "Our customer was very rude about my pregnancy," she said finally. "I stood up to him. My manager wasn't happy." Mrs. Chen made a disapproving sound. "Rich people think money buy right to be cruel." She shook her head. "What you do now?" "I don't know," Emily admitted, the words tasting like defeat. "Look for another job, I guess. But who's going to hire a visibly pregnant waitress?" "You smart girl, find way." Mrs. Chen patted her hand. "Always darkest before morning comes." Emily nodded, though the platitude offered little comfort. She finished her tea in silence, gathered her sleeping son in her arms, and thanked Mrs. Chen again before crossing the hall to their apartment. The one-bedroom space was clean but sparse, mismatched furniture from thrift stores, walls in desperate need of fresh paint, a window that never quite closed properly, letting in drafts during winter months. Emily tucked Noah into his bed in the bedroom they shared, brushing his dark hair from his forehead. "Love you, baby," she whispered, though he couldn't hear. In the bathroom, Emily finally allowed herself to look in the mirror. The woman staring back seemed like a stranger, hollow-eyed, exhausted, broken. She peeled off her clothes, examining the angry red marks where her too-tight uniform had dug into her expanding waistline throughout her shift. Under the lukewarm shower, Hot water was an expense she rationed. Emily replayed Thompson's words, each one a fresh cut. What hurt most wasn't the insults themselves, but how the other diners had watched in silence. How Kevin had immediately taken Thompson's side. How the entire system was designed to protect men like Thompson, while women like her were expected to endure whatever cruelty came their way with a smile. Wrapped in a threadbare towel, Emily sank onto the edge of her bed, her wet hair dripping onto the floor. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "You okay?" Kevin's furious. Thompson demanded, "You be fired, call me." Emily tossed the phone aside without responding. She was too drained to discuss it tonight, too afraid her voice would break if she tried to speak the words aloud. As she pulled on an oversized t-shirt to sleep in, her fingers brushed against the small scar on her shoulder, a reminder of the last time Tom had lost his temper, 3 weeks before he walked out. She had stayed then, convinced she could make it work for Noah's sake, convinced she deserved no better. Tonight felt different. Something had shifted when she refused to pick up Thompson's money. For the first time in years, she had stood her ground, even knowing the consequences. Lying in bed beside her sleeping son, listening to the rain against the window, Emily made a decision. If Kevin fired her tomorrow, she wouldn't beg to keep her job. She wouldn't apologize for demanding basic respect. There had to be another way forward, one that didn't require surrendering her humanity piece by piece. Sleep eluded her as her mind raced through options, each one more desperate than the last. Around 3 a.m., her phone buzzed again. Expecting Sarah, she was surprised to see an unknown number. The text was brief. "Saw what happened at Sovereign tonight, disgusting. I have information about Thompson you might find interesting. Call me if you want to talk. Diana Porter, NY Daily." Emily stared at the message, her heart racing. A reporter. Someone had witnessed Thompson's behavior and thought it newsworthy. Her finger hovered over the delete button. Getting involved with the press seemed risky, especially if she was still employed tomorrow. But then Noah coughed in his sleep, a reminder of the medicine they could barely afford, of the baby coming who would need so much more, of the rage still burning in her chest. Just before dawn, Emily made a second decision, one that would set in motion events she couldn't possibly foresee. With trembling fingers, she typed a response. "I'll talk to you, but not just about tonight, about everything." As the first grey light of morning filtered through the window, Emily finally drifted into restless sleep, unaware that across the city, Richard Thompson was making plans of his own. "You're firing me because I wouldn't let a man humiliate me." Emily's voice echoed in Kevin's cramped office, a converted storage closet at the back of the Sovereign. Morning sunlight streamed through the single window, illuminating dust particles that danced between them like tiny witnesses. Kevin wouldn't meet her eyes, focusing instead on the paperwork before him. The official reason is creating a hostile dining environment. "Mr. Thompson is a valued patron who spent over $3,000 last night after you left. After he threw money at me like I was trash," Emily corrected, her hands instinctively protective over her stomach. "Did any of the other servers tell you what really happened?" "It doesn't matter, Emily." Kevin finally looked up, his expression a mix of resignation and cowardice. "This isn't personal. I have a restaurant to run. Thompson has connections to half the VIPs who dine here." Emily laughed bitterly. "Not personal. He mocked my pregnancy, my life choices, my financial situation, in front of an entire restaurant of people. And you did nothing. What did you expect me to do? Risk the restaurant's reputation by confronting one of New York's most powerful businessmen?" Kevin pushed a manila envelope across the desk. "I'm giving you 2 weeks severance. That's more than company policy requires." Emily stared at the envelope but didn't take it. 2 weeks, 14 days to find another job, visibly pregnant and now without a reference. "You know this isn't right," she said quietly. "Right doesn't pay the bills," Kevin replied, echoing the very dilemma that had kept Emily silent for so long. "Look, between us, Thompson is an asshole. Everyone knows it. But he's an asshole who drops 20 grand here every month and brings other assholes who do the same." He sighed. "I'm sorry, Emily, I really am. The worst part was that he probably meant it." The pity in his eyes made her stomach turn. She stood up, leaving the envelope untouched. "Keep your blood money. I'll collect my final paycheck next week." Outside, Kevin's office, the restaurant was coming to life for the lunch service. Staff bustled about, carefully avoiding her gaze. News traveled fast in the service industry. By tomorrow, everyone would know. Emily Matthews stood up to Richard Thompson and lost everything. Sarah intercepted her near the kitchen, pulling her into the empty staff room. "Tell me it's not true. Kevin didn't actually fire you." Emily nodded, a strange numbness spreading through her chest. "Effective immediately. Thompson's money was more important than my dignity." "That spineless weasel," Sarah hissed. "We should all walk out, start a scene in front of the customers. And then you'd all be unemployed too." Emily shook her head. "Don't throw away your job for me, Sarah. Noah and I will be fine." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "What will you do? Find another job. Fast." Emily began emptying her locker, stuffing her few belongings into her bag. "I have an interview at Carmichael's on Thursday. It's just a diner, but the tips are decent." Another lie. There was no interview. And what about... Sarah gestured to Emily's stomach. "This baby isn't going to wait for me to find the perfect situation." Emily forced a smile. "We'll manage. We always do." As she gathered the last of her things, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Diana Porter, the reporter. Emily had almost forgotten their brief exchange in the pre-dawn hours. "I should go," she told Sarah, suddenly eager to escape the suffocating weight of her colleague's pity. "I'll text you later." The April sun was blinding after the dimness of the Sovereign. Emily stood on the sidewalk disoriented, watching Manhattan's endless parade of busy people rushing past. None of them knew her world had just collapsed. None of them cared. She checked her phone again. Diana had texted, "Coffee, I'm at Bluestone. Cafe 2 blocks from the Sovereign. My treat." Emily hesitated. She was exhausted, heartbroken, and still processing her termination. But the urgency of her situation couldn't be ignored. Noah needed his medication refilled by Monday. The rent was due in 10 days, and her baby kicked against her ribs, a reminder of the approaching hospital bills. With a deep breath, she typed back, "On my way." Bluestone Cafe was a stark contrast to the Sovereign, casual, moderately priced, filled with ordinary New Yorkers rather than the elite. Emily spotted Diana immediately, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s with a sleek bob and observant eyes. That tracked Emily's approach. "Emily Matthews?" Diana stood, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Emily admitted, sliding into the booth across from her. "It's been a complicated morning." "Let me guess," Diana said, signaling for the waitress. "You're now unemployed." Emily stared at her. "How did you know?" "Because I've been covering Richard Thompson for years." Diana's smile was grim. "His pattern is predictable. Humiliate, then eliminate anyone who challenges him." The waitress arrived, and Diana ordered coffees for both of them. Emily requested water instead, gesturing to her stomach. Once they were alone again, Diana leaned forward. "So, what happened after I left last night?" "I was at the corner table with a sauce when Thompson started his little performance." Emily recounted the events. Thompson's escalating comments, the money thrown at her feet, her refusal to pick it up, and finally this morning's termination. Diana took notes, nodding occasionally. Classic Thompson. "Did you know he's been sued for sexual harassment 3 times, all settled out of court with ironclad NDAs?" "No," Emily said, "but I'm not surprised. What might surprise you is that those were just the cases with enough evidence to file. I've interviewed dozens of women with similar stories who were too afraid to come forward." Diana slid a business card across the table. "Your experience. Last night wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern of behavior that deserves exposure." Emily stared at the card. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I want to write about what happened to you. Put a human face on the story of how powerful men like Thompson abuse service workers with impunity." Diana's eyes were intent. "You stood up to him, Emily. That's rare. Most people just take it." The waitress returned with their drinks. Emily wrapped her fingers around the cool water glass, buying time to think. "I need a job, not publicity," she finally said. "I have a 5-year-old son and a baby on the way. I can't afford to be blacklisted in the industry." "What if there was another way?" Diana asked quietly. "What if you could help ensure Thompson faces consequences while securing your family's future?" Emily frowned. "I don't understand. My editor has authorized me to offer compensation for exclusive rights to your story. It's not a fortune, but it might help while you look for another position." Diana named a figure that made Emily's breath catch. "And I have contacts at several restaurants that would be thrilled to hire someone with your experience. Owners who despise Thompson and everything he represents." The offer was tempting, almost too good to be true. "Why me? Surely there are other stories, other victims with more damaging information." "Because you did what no one does. You refused to be dehumanized. You walked away from that money. Diana leaned back. People will respond to that, and from a purely cynical journalistic perspective, a pregnant waitress standing up to a billionaire bully makes for a compelling headline. Emily sipped her water, thinking of Noah's medical needs, of the baby growing inside her, of the rent due in 10 days. "I need time to think about it," she said finally. "Of course," Diana nodded. "But don't take too long. News cycles move quickly." As they parted outside the cafe, Diana added, "One more thing, Thompson is vindictive. If you do go public, be prepared. He'll try to discredit you, dig into your past, find pressure points. That's his playbook." Emily thought of Tom, of the night she'd fled their apartment with Noah to escape his rage, of the police reports she'd ultimately dropped when he threatened to fight for custody. She thought of the mounting medical bills, the credit card debt, the tax payment plan she'd negotiated last year. "My life's an open book," she said with a sad smile. "Not much to find." Walking home, Emily felt the weight of two impossible choices: stay silent, scramble for whatever job would take her, and struggle to make ends meet. Or speak out, face Thompson's retaliation, and potentially put her family at even greater risk. By the time she reached her apartment building, another text had arrived. This one from an unknown number. "Ms. Matthews, my name is James Harrington. We met briefly at the Sovereign. I'd like to discuss a potential opportunity. Please call at your convenience." James, Thompson's associate who had laughed uncomfortably at his cruel jokes. What could he possibly want with her? The baby kicked again, harder this time. Emily pressed her hand against the spot, suddenly overwhelmed by the responsibility crushing down on her shoulders. Whatever choice she made would affect not just her future, but the futures of the two vulnerable lives depending on her, and time was running out. Emily paced her small living room, phone clutched in her hand. Noah was at a playdate with Mrs. Chen's grandson, giving her a rare moment of solitude to process the morning's events and the two competing offers now before her. Diana Porter wanted her story. James Harrington wanted what exactly? The rational choice was clear: call Diana, take the money, find a new job with her connections. Yet Emily hesitated, curiosity and caution warring within her. What could Thompson's associate possibly want? To threaten her? Bribe her into silence? Apologize? Finally, she dialed James's number, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Ms. Matthews." His voice was carefully neutral. "Thank you for calling. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Emily replied honestly. "What do you want, Mr. Harrington?" "To meet. In person." There was a pause. "I have a proposition that might interest you, but it's not something I'm comfortable discussing over the phone." Emily laughed without humor. "You'll forgive me if I'm not eager to meet with anyone associated with Richard Thompson. I understand your hesitation. What if we meet somewhere public? Your choice of location." Another pause. "I promise this isn't what you think." Emily considered hanging up. She had enough complications without adding cryptic meetings with Thompson's associates, but desperation has its own gravity, a relentless pull toward any possibility, however slim, of escape. Bryant Park, 1 hour, near the fountain. She named a location crowded with tourists and office workers on lunch breaks, a place where she could easily walk away if necessary. "I'll be there, alone," James added, as if reading her mind. "Thank you for giving me this chance." The spring. Air carried a hint of warmth as Emily arrived at Bryant Park, her body tense with apprehension. She spotted James immediately, his expensive suit making him stand out among the casual lunch crowd. He sat alone on a bench, briefcase resting beside him, looking distinctly uncomfortable in the public setting. Emily approached slowly, one hand protective over her stomach, a gesture that had become instinctive since her pregnancy began to show. James stood when he saw her. "Miss Matthews, thank you for coming." His eyes flickered to her stomach briefly before returning to her face. "Would you like to sit? Can I get you something to drink?" "Just tell me why I'm here," Emily replied, remaining standing. James nodded, seeming to respect her directness. "I want to offer you a job." Whatever Emily had been expecting, it wasn't this. "Excuse me? Please, sit. Just for a moment." When she reluctantly complied, he continued, "I wasn't entirely honest last night. I don't run restaurants on the West Coast. I'm the CEO of Harrington Hospitality Group. We own 23 restaurants across the country, including 6 here. In New York." Emily's mind raced. Harrington Hospitality Group was a major player in the industry, known for their innovative concepts and, if restaurant gossip was to be believed, excellent employee benefits. Why would you offer me a job? You don't know anything about my qualifications. I know enough. James straightened his tie, a nervous gesture. I watched you handle Richard Thompson with more dignity and professionalism than I did. I sat there, a grown man with considerably more power and resources than you have, and said nothing while he degraded you. He looked away, shame evident in his posture. It's not the first time I've witnessed Richard's behavior and remained silent, but watching you stand up to him, it was a wake-up call. Emily studied him skeptically. So, this is what? A guilty conscience offering charity to the poor pregnant woman? This is me recognizing talent and character when I see it. James opened his briefcase and removed a folder. I'm offering you a position as assistant manager at Verdant, our new farm-to-table concept opening next month in Soho. Full benefits, including comprehensive health insurance that would cover your prenatal care and delivery. Maternity leave with partial pay. Starting salary of $65,000 plus quarterly bonuses. Emily stared at him, certain she had misheard. Assistant manager, $65,000. The sum was more than double what she made at the Sovereign, even with tips. This is a joke, she said flatly. Some cruel game Thompson put you up to. Richard knows nothing about this. James handed her the folder. The offer letter is inside, along with details about the benefits package and job description. All legitimate, all real. Emily took the folder with trembling hands but didn't open it. Why would you do this for a stranger? James was quiet for a moment. My sister was 7 months pregnant when her husband died. No insurance, no savings. Working as a teacher in a system that barely paid enough to cover rent. I watched her struggle, taking on extra jobs until she collapsed from exhaustion. His voice grew tight. She lost the baby, nearly died herself. The raw pain in his voice felt genuine. Emily opened the folder, scanning the offer letter with growing disbelief. Everything appeared legitimate. Company letterhead, detailed benefits, explanation. Even a personal note from James expressing his hope that she would accept. This position was meant to be filled internally, James continued. But I have the authority to hire who I see fit. You have restaurant experience, clearly work well under pressure, and possess the kind of integrity I want in my management team. Emily closed the folder, her mind spinning. If I accept this, what's the catch? What do you expect in return? Nothing. When Emily raised an eyebrow, James sighed. All right, not nothing. I hope you'll drop any potential legal action or media exposure regarding the incident at the Sovereign. Not to protect Richard. He deserves whatever's coming to him, but to protect the restaurant and its staff. They're not responsible for his behavior or Kevin's poor handling of the situation. Diana Porter's offer flashed through Emily's mind. The reporter had dangled financial compensation and industry connections, but temporary solutions at best. This was something else entirely: stability, healthcare, a genuine career path. I need time to think, she said finally. This is overwhelming. Take the weekend, James replied, standing. The number on that letter is my personal cell. Call me with your decision by Monday morning. As he turned to leave, Emily found her voice again. Mr. Harrington, why were you dining with Thompson if you despise his behavior so much? James paused, a shadow crossing his face. Because I convinced myself business relationships required tolerating the intolerable. Because I told myself speaking up wouldn't change anything. He met her eyes. Because I lacked the courage you showed last night. After he departed, Emily sat alone, the folder heavy in her lap. The fountain bubbled cheerfully nearby. Children laughed as they chased pigeons. Office workers enjoyed their lunch breaks. Normal life continuing all around her, while her own hung suspended between impossible choices. Diana offered the chance to expose Thompson, to be part of something larger than herself. James offered security, stability, a future for her children. Both came with strings attached. Both required trust she wasn't sure she could give. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. Noah asking for you. Not feeling good? Fever again. Emily's momentary elation evaporated. Noah's asthma often triggered fevers that could spiral quickly into emergency room visits. Visits they could no longer afford without insurance. The choice that had seemed so complicated moments before suddenly crystallized with brutal clarity. She called James before leaving the park. I accept the position, she said, without preamble. When can I start? Walking to the subway, folder clutched to her chest, Emily felt a confusing mixture of relief and unease. She had secured her family's immediate future, yes, But at what cost? By accepting James's offer, she was implicitly agreeing to remain silent about Thompson's behavior, allowing him to continue unchecked, to humiliate other women as he had humiliated her. As the subway car lurched beneath Manhattan, carrying her back to her sick child, Emily made herself a silent promise this wasn't over. James had offered her a lifeline, and she had grabbed it with both hands. But Richard Thompson would not escape consequences so easily. She just needed time, security, and a plan. What Emily couldn't know, as the train hurtled through the darkness, was that Thompson himself was already setting events in motion that would make her promise both easier and infinitely more dangerous to keep. 3 weeks into her new position at Verdant, Emily was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. The promised salary had materialized, the health insurance had been activated immediately, and James had even arranged for her to start work before the restaurant's official opening, allowing her to train while the space was still being prepared. It felt too good to be true. And in Emily's experience, things that felt too good to be true usually were. She stood in Verdant's gleaming kitchen, clipboard in hand, reviewing delivery schedules with the head chef when her phone buzzed. Diana Porter again, the 5th call. This week. Emily silenced it without answering. She had avoided the reporter's increasingly insistent messages since accepting James's offer, guilt gnawing at her each time she hit decline. "Everything okay?" asked Marco, the executive chef, glancing at her phone. "Fine," Emily smiled tightly. "Just an old friend who doesn't understand what busy with a new job means." Marco nodded sympathetically before returning to their discussion. It's about organic produce suppliers, but Emily's mind had already drifted elsewhere. The guilt of ignoring Diana mixed uncomfortably with her growing suspicion that her good fortune might be more complicated than it appeared. James had been nothing but professional and supportive. Her co-workers seemed genuinely welcoming. Noah's medications were covered by the new insurance, and for the first time in years, Emily had been able to see a proper obstetrician for her pregnancy. She should be feeling nothing but gratitude. Yet something nagged at her, a persistent whisper of doubt that grew louder each night as she lay awake in her apartment. The same apartment she could now barely afford, with enough left over for a small savings account. The same apartment where, 2 nights ago, she had declined Diana's final plea to go public with her story. "I have to protect my family," Emily had told her. "I can't risk this job." "He'll do it again," Diana had replied, disappointment evident in her voice. To someone else who doesn't have the luck of a guilty bystander offering salvation. Those words had cut deeper than Emily wanted to admit. Her workday ended at 6, another miracle compared to the grueling 12-hour shifts at the Sovereign. As Emily collected her things from the office she shared with the other assistant manager, her phone buzzed yet again. Not Diana this time, but Sarah. "Emily?" Sarah's voice was tight, with barely controlled panic. "Are you alone? Can you talk?" Emily stepped outside onto the quiet Soho street. "Oh, what's wrong?" "It's Kevin, he just fired me." Emily's blood ran cold. "What? Why? Officially?" "Repeated violations of service standards." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Unofficially. Thompson's back. He came in tonight, asked for me specifically, then spent the entire meal finding fault with everything I did. Left a 1-star review mentioning me by name before he even left the restaurant." Emily leaned against the brick wall, sudden nausea washing over her that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. "Sarah, I'm so sorry." "It gets worse." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "He asked about you, wanted to know where you were working. Now, said something about unfinished business." The evening air suddenly felt too thin, insufficient to fill Emily's lungs. What did Kevin tell him? Nothing. Kevin honestly doesn't know. "But," Sarah hesitated. "Emily, I think Thompson is looking for you, and he doesn't strike me as the type who gives up easily." After promising to help Sarah find another position, Emily walked to the subway in a daze. Thompson was looking for her. The man who had humiliated her, cost her her job, now wanted to know where she had landed. The implications sent ice through her veins. She was so distracted she almost missed the black sedan idling near the station entrance, almost missed the familiar silver-haired figure watching her from the back seat. Richard Thompson. Their eyes met through the tinted window, his lips curving into a smile that never reached his eyes. Then the sedan pulled away, merging smoothly into traffic. Emily stood frozen, heart hammering against her ribs. It wasn't a coincidence. He had been waiting for her, watching her, How had he found her? The answer came with sickening clarity as she boarded the train. James. It had to be. Despite his claims that Thompson knew nothing about her hiring, despite all his talk of conscience and doing the right thing, James had told Thompson where she was. The betrayal stung, but the fear stung worse. What did Thompson want? Why track her down after all this time? By the time Emily reached her apartment, her mind had conjured a dozen increasingly terrifying scenarios. She checked the locks twice, then called Mrs. Chen to make sure Noah was safe and could stay a while longer. "You sound scared," Mrs. Chen observed. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Emily lied, her third such lie that day. "Just running late." She paced her small living room, debating her options. Confront James? Quit Verdant? Call Diana? Each choice seemed to lead to more problems, more uncertainty, more risk to the fragile security she had built. Her phone rang again, an unknown number. Emily stared at it, knowing somehow that it was Thompson, but unable to let it go to voicemail. Curiosity and dread compelled her to answer. Ms. Matthews. His voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth and cold as glacial ice. "I believe we have unfinished business." Emily's throat constricted. "I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Thompson. On the contrary, I think we have much to discuss." A pause. "Starting with how quickly your principals were bought. James told me about your arrangement." "There was no arrangement," Emily managed, anger temporarily overriding fear. "James offered me a job because he recognized my qualifications." Thompson laughed, the sound like broken glass. "Is that what he told you? How charming. Did he also tell you that his company is seeking investors? That his meeting with me that night was to discuss a potential 8-figure injection into Harrington Hospitality Group?" Emily sank onto her couch, the implications landing like physical blows. "You're lying." "Am I? Ask him yourself. Ask him if Harrington Hospitality isn't on the verge of bankruptcy. Ask him if hiring Richard Thompson's latest victim wasn't a convenient way to curry favor while appearing to take the moral high ground. Each word twisted in Emily's chest, because even as she wanted to reject them, they aligned too neatly with her own suspicions. The job that appeared from nowhere, the salary that seemed too generous, the timing that was too perfect. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "To meet, to discuss terms that could benefit us both. I'm not interested in anything you have to offer. Not even the truth about James Harrington." Thompson's voice hardened. "Not even proof that your white knight is actually working directly for me." After he hung up, Emily sat motionless, one hand pressed against her stomach where the baby kicked restlessly, sensing her distress. The carefully constructed sense of security she had maintained these past weeks was crumbling around her. If Thompson was telling the truth, if James had hired her as some sort of twisted appeasement to a potential investor, then everything she had believed was a lie. And if Thompson was lying, that was almost worse, because it meant he was going to extraordinary lengths to torment her. Either way, the brief period of peace she had found was over. Emily glanced at her phone, at Diana's name in her missed calls. The reporter had warned her that Thompson was vindictive, that he wouldn't let perceived slights go unpunished. She should have listened. With trembling fingers, she typed a message to James. "We need to talk, now, about Richard Thompson." The response came almost immediately. "Where are you? Stay there. I'm coming over." Emily stared at the message, no longer certain who she could trust. James, who might have used her as a pawn in a business game. Sarah, who had her own reasons to resent Thompson. Diana, whose journalistic instincts might override any concern for Emily's well-being. For the first time since Tom had walked out, Emily felt truly, completely alone. And somewhere in Manhattan, in his penthouse office tower, Richard Thompson was smiling, knowing exactly what he had done to her sense of safety. The game had just begun. Emily paced her apartment, the walls seeming to close in with each passing minute. James had texted that he was 20 minutes away. 20 minutes to decide who to trust, what to believe, how to protect herself and her family. The knock, when it came, startled her so badly she nearly dropped her phone. Through the peephole, she saw James standing alone in the hallway, his usual corporate polish disheveled, tie loosened, hair mussed, as if he'd been running anxious hands through it. Emily. His relief was palpable when she opened the door. "Are you okay? Your text worried me." She didn't invite him in, blocking the doorway with her body. "Thompson called me tonight. He knows I work for you. He was waiting outside Verdant." James's face drained of color. "What? That's impossible. I never told him." "He says your company is nearly bankrupt," Emily continued, watching his expression. carefully. "He says you hired me to curry favor with him as a potential investor." The flash of guilt across James's face confirmed everything before he could speak. Emily felt something crack inside her chest, the fragile trust she had foolishly given him. "I can explain," he began, a phrase Emily had heard too many times from Tom when caught in lies. "Yes, Harrington Hospitality is facing financial difficulties, and yes, Thompson Capital is one of several investment groups we've approached, but that's not why I hired you." "Then why?" "The truth this time." James sighed, shoulders slumping. "May I come in, please?" She hesitated, then stepped aside, leaving the door open behind him. A small act of self-protection, an escape route. "The company is in trouble," James admitted, standing awkwardly in her small living room. "My father overexpanded before the pandemic, and we've been struggling to recover. And hiring me was what? A bribe, a way to smooth things over after you witnessed his behavior." "No," James's denial came quickly. "After that night at the Sovereign, I decided against pursuing Thompson's investment. His treatment of you, it crystallized everything I'd heard about him, but had ignored." Emily crossed her arms protectively over her stomach. "So why hire me?" "Because I genuinely was impressed by your handling of an impossible situation. Because I did have a position to fill." He met her eyes directly. "And yes, partly out of guilt, but not as some plot with Thompson." "Then how does he know where I work? How did he find me?" James ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know. Maybe someone from the Sovereign told him. The industry is small, word gets around. He fired Sarah tonight," Emily said, watching James's reaction. "Set her up to fail, then made sure Kevin terminated her, just like he did with me." "Jesus." James looked genuinely disturbed. "Emily, you need to understand, Thompson is dangerous. Not just unpleasant or entitled. Dangerous. He destroys people who stand up to him, who embarrass him. So what am I supposed to do? Just wait for him to come after me?" Emily's voice broke. "I have a 5-year-old son, a baby on the way. I can't live like this. We'll figure it out. I won't let him hurt you or your family." James stepped forward, then stopped when Emily flinched away. "I understand your trust in me is damaged. I should have been transparent about the company's situation, but my offer was genuine. Your job is secure." Emily laughed bitterly. "Nothing feels secure right now." Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Thompson just left the Sovereign. Heard him tell his driver something about Queens. Emily, I think he's coming to your place." The blood drained from Emily's face as she showed the message to James. "He's coming here? How does he know where I live?" James's expression hardened. "Pack a bag. Now. Essential items only. You and Noah need to go somewhere safe tonight." "We have nowhere to go," Emily whispered, panic rising in her throat. "My sister's place in Connecticut. Thompson doesn't know about her." When Emily hesitated, he added, "Please, let me help fix this." 20 minutes later, a small suitcase packed with essentials, Emily stood in Mrs. Chen's doorway, trying to explain the inexplicable to her confused son. "But I don't want to go on a trip," Noah protested, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "School is tomorrow." "It's just for a few days, baby," Emily forced a smile. "Like an adventure. And Mrs. Chen will get your homework so you won't fall behind." Mrs. Chen watched with concerned eyes but didn't ask questions. "You call when you arrive," she said simply. "Let me know you're safe." In James's car, Noah quickly fell asleep in the back seat, leaving Emily and James in uncomfortable silence as they drove through the late-night streets of Queens. "I should tell you," James said finally. "I contacted Diana Porter this afternoon." Emily's head snapped toward him. "What? Why?" "Because Thompson came to my office today making veiled threats about workplace safety concerns at Verdant, about health inspectors finding code violations before we could open." James kept his eyes on the road. "He mentioned you by name, said it was interesting that I had hired you. The implication was clear. Thompson was prepared to target not just Emily, but the entire restaurant. Dozens of jobs, James's company, all collateral damage in his vendetta. Diana has been investigating Thompson for months," James continued. "She has sources, documents, other victims. I thought together we might find a way to push back." Emily's mind raced. "She wanted me to go public with my story. I refused. Maybe it's time to reconsider." They were approaching the Whitestone Bridge when Emily noticed the headlights behind them, steady, maintaining the same distance despite James's varying speed. "James," she said quietly, "I think we're being followed." He checked the rear view mirror, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. "Black sedan." Emily nodded, fear closing her throat. He's having us tailed. Probably has someone watching your apartment too. James took a sudden exit, turning down a side street. The sedan followed. Emily, I need you to trust me one more time. I have a plan, but it's risky. What kind of plan? The kind where we stop running and start fighting back. James made another turn, this time into an all-night diner's parking lot. The sedan cruised past, then circled back, parking across the street. Thompson thinks he's untouchable because of his money and power, but there's one thing he values above all else, his reputation. Inside the brightly lit diner, Noah still asleep against Emily's shoulder, James outlined his idea. It was audacious, potentially dangerous, and relied on perfect timing. It would require Emily to confront her tormentor directly, to make herself a target once more. It's too risky, Emily said after he finished. He could ruin all of us, you, me, Sarah, anyone who helps. He's already trying to ruin us, James replied. The question is whether we let him do it on his terms or choose the battlefield ourselves. Emily glanced down at Noah, his small face peaceful in sleep, unaware of the danger swirling around them. Then she thought of her unborn child, who deserved a world where men like Thompson couldn't destroy lives with impunity. If we do this, she said slowly, I need guarantees. Written guarantees about my job, my benefits, Noah's safety. I can't risk everything on just your word. Done. Anything else? Emily took a deep breath, making the hardest decision of her life. Yes, call Diana Porter. Tell her I'm ready to talk, but on my terms, not hers. As they left the diner, the black sedan still watching from across the street, Emily felt something she hadn't experienced since the night at the Sovereign. The cold clarity of righteous anger replacing paralyzing fear. Thompson had hunted her, threatened her family, upended her life. Now she would show him that even prey, when cornered, could become dangerous. In the car, heading not to Connecticut but back toward Manhattan, Emily made one more call, to Sarah. I need your help, she said when her friend answered. It's time to make Thompson pay for what he's done to both of us. What none of them realized was that Thompson had made a critical mistake. He had pushed Emily past fear into the territory, beyond it, where a mother protecting her children was capable of things even she couldn't imagine. The trap was being set, and Richard Thompson was walking straight into it. Diana Porter's apartment in Tribeca was exactly what Emily had expected. Sparsely furnished, walls covered with framed newspaper articles, and a desk buried under stacks of documents and notebooks. What she hadn't expected was the tension that filled the room as Diana, James, Sarah, and now herself tried to outline a strategy without succumbing to fear. Thompson has his fingers in everything, Diana explained, spreading photos across her. Coffee table, tech investments, real estate, even a congressional superpass. But his reputation is pristine, carefully managed by a PR team that costs more annually than most people make in a lifetime. Emily shifted uncomfortably, acutely aware of the baby, kicking inside her and Noah asleep in Diana's spare bedroom. It was past midnight, and exhaustion pressed against her like a physical weight. What these companies don't know, Diana continued, is that Thompson's business practices skirt the edge of legality. I've been tracking patterns of intimidation, harassment, and potential financial improprieties for months, but I need concrete evidence, something irrefutable, which is where Emily comes in, James said, glancing at her with something like apology in his eyes. The plan they had outlined in the diner, refined now with Diana's expertise and Sarah's insider knowledge of the Sovereign, was both elegant and terrifying in its simplicity. Emily would return to the Sovereign as a customer, confronting Thompson at his regular Thursday night table. Diana would arrange for a sympathetic journalist friend to be seated nearby. Sarah, through her remaining contacts at the restaurant, would ensure Emily was seated within Thompson's line of sight. The goal isn't just to provoke him, Diana explained. It's to get him to reveal something damaging, his harassment of women, his business practices, anything we can use as leverage. And how exactly am I supposed to make that happen? Emily asked, one hand protectively over her stomach. Just walk up and hope he incriminates himself. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a small device. With this, it looks like a normal smartphone, but it's modified to record audio clearly from up to 15 feet away. My cousin works in surveillance equipment. Emily stared at the device. Is that even legal? New York is a one-party consent state, Diana replied. As long as you're part of the conversation, you can record it without his knowledge. And what happens when he sees me? When he realizes what we're doing, Emily's voice cracked. He's already shown he's willing to follow me, to threaten my job, my family. James leaned forward. That's why timing is critical. Thompson is flying to Tokyo on Friday for a major tech conference. He'll be out of the country for a week. That gives us time to prepare the story, gather additional evidence, build a case, strong enough that even his money and connections can't bury it. It's still not enough, Emily insisted. One recorded conversation won't bring down someone like Thompson. He'll deny it, hire lawyers, spin it as a disgruntled ex-employee with a vendetta. Diana's expression hardened. That's why we need multiple angles of attack. I have 3 other women willing to speak on background, former employees at Thompson's, companies who experienced similar harassment. I have financial documents showing questionable transfers to offshore accounts. What I don't have is recent, indisputable evidence of his character and tactics. The man I saw at the Sovereign, Emily said quietly, wasn't just rude or entitled. He was calculated. He enjoyed humiliating me publicly. That kind of cruelty doesn't happen by accident. Exactly, Diana nodded. Men like Thompson believe their wealth makes them untouchable. They rarely bother hiding their true nature from those they consider beneath them. Service workers, administrative staff, anyone they can control through financial power. The plan crystallized in Emily's mind. Clear, dangerous, and perhaps the only way forward. She would need to make herself vulnerable again, to face the man who had haunted her nightmares these past weeks, to willingly place herself in his sights. If I do this, she said finally, I need guarantees. Noah stays somewhere safe, somewhere Thompson can't find him. And I need an escape route, security, a car waiting, whatever it takes to ensure I can. Get away quickly if things go wrong. Done, James agreed immediately. My sister can take Noah to her place in Connecticut. I'll handle security personally. Sarah squeezed Emily's hand. I'll be inside the Sovereign the entire time. Kevin still doesn't know I know about Thompson's role in my firing. I told him I was picking up my final paycheck, and he said I could come Thursday night. The clock on Diana's wall ticked past 1 a.m. as they finalized details. Emily felt a strange calm settling over her, the calm of someone who had moved beyond fear into necessary action. As they prepared to leave, Diana pulled her aside. There's something you should know before you commit to this. Thompson doesn't just harass women who challenge him. He investigates them, finds pressure points, vulnerabilities. Emily's blood ran cold. What are you saying? I'm saying he might already know about Tom, about the police reports you filed and withdrew, about the restraining order that expired last year. Diana's eyes were compassionate, but unflinching. If you do this, be prepared for him to use everything against you. How did you? Emily began, then stopped. Of course. Diana was a journalist. She would have researched Emily thoroughly before approaching her about the story. I had to know who I was asking to take this risk, Diana said simply. Your history doesn't change anything about this situation or my commitment to exposing Thompson, but you deserve to make an informed choice. The ride back to James's penthouse, where they would stay until Thursday, passed in silence. Emily stared out the window at Manhattan's glittering skyline, each light representing lives untouched by the kind of fear that had become her constant companion. In the guest bedroom, she curled around Noah's sleeping form, breathing in the sweet scent of his hair, listening to his steady breathing. Everything she was about to risk, she was risking for him, for her unborn child, for the kind of world they deserved. Her phone buzzed softly, a text from Sarah. Are you sure about this? It's not too late to back out. Emily typed her response, with trembling fingers. I'm sure. He thinks women like us are easy targets, time to prove him wrong. Sleep eluded her as dawn broke over the city. Emily slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Noah, and stood at the window watching the city come alive. Somewhere out there, Richard Thompson was going about his life, confident in his power, unaware that the pregnant waitress he had humiliated was about to change everything. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. James drafted legal documents guaranteeing Emily's position at Verdant, regardless of the outcome. Diana coached her on potential questions and responses, ways to guide Thompson toward revealing statements. Sarah scouted the Sovereign, confirming Thompson's reservation and mapping exit routes. On Thursday morning, Emily kissed Noah goodbye, heartbreaking at his confusion and fear as James's sister drove him away to safety. Just a short vacation, baby, she promised. I'll come get you very soon. By evening, Dressed in a simple but elegant maternity dress purchased for the occasion, Emily stood outside the Sovereign for the first time since her termination. The familiar facade, once the site of her humiliation, now represented something different, a battlefield of her choosing. "Ready?" Sarah asked through the small earpiece Emily wore, hidden by her hair. Emily took a deep breath, one hand on her stomach, where her child kicked as if sensing her determination. "Ready." As she walked through the doors, head held high, Emily felt a strange sense of power. Thompson had taken her job, her security, her peace of mind, but he had underestimated what she would do to protect her family. Tonight, she would show him exactly what that meant. The Sovereign looked exactly as Emily remembered, crystal chandeliers reflecting off polished surfaces, the soft murmur of expensive conversations, the practiced smiles of servers who depended on the whims of the wealthy for their livelihood. Only now she saw it all from the other side, seated at a table normally reserved for VIPs, a glass of sparkling water before her. "He just arrived," Sarah's voice came through the tiny earpiece. Black suit, usual table by the window, 2 associates with him. Emily didn't turn, didn't need to. She could feel Thompson's presence like a cold draft, raising goosebumps along her arms. Diana's journalist friend Michael sat 3 tables away, apparently engrossed in his menu, but positioned perfectly to overhear any interaction. "Take your time," Diana coached through the earpiece. "Let him notice you first." Emily adjusted the decorative brooch on her dress, the disguised recording device Sarah had provided, and took a deliberate sip of her water. The baby kicked, as if sensing her tension, and she pressed a hand to her stomach, a gesture that now felt like both comfort and armor. "He's seen you," Sarah whispered urgently. "He's staring." His whole body just went rigid. Emily forced herself to breathe evenly, to maintain the appearance of calm despite the thundering of her heart. She had rehearsed this moment dozens of times over the past 2 days, but now that it was here, every carefully prepared word evaporated from her mind. "Ms. Matthews." Thompson's voice came from behind her, cold and controlled with an undercurrent, a fury. What an unexpected surprise. Emily turned slowly, meeting his gaze with a steadiness she didn't feel. "Mr. Thompson, I'm surprised you remember me. I make it a point to remember those who show such poor judgment." He stood beside her table, looming over her, using his physical presence as intimidation. "Though I admit, your choice to return here is bolder than I would have expected." "I'm celebrating," Emily replied, the rehearsed line finally coming back to her. "My new position, assistant manager at Verdant." Something dangerous flashed across Thompson's face. "Ah, yes, James Harrington's latest venture. A position I understand you obtained through rather unorthodox channels. If you mean being hired based on my qualifications rather than my willingness to tolerate abuse, then yes, quite unorthodox." Thompson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "May I join you? Just for a moment. I think we have matters to discuss that would benefit from privacy." Every instinct screamed at Emily to refuse, to maintain the public setting where witnesses would constrain Thompson's behavior. But the plan required more, required him to believe he had the upper hand, to let his guard down enough to reveal something incriminating. "Briefly," she agreed, gesturing to the chair across from her. Thompson sat with practiced grace, signaling to a hovering server who appeared instantly at his side. "Macallan Neat." Once the server departed, he turned his full attention to Emily, his gaze calculating. "You've made a series of poor decisions recently, Ms. Matthews, aligning yourself with James Harrington, refusing my calls, and now this provocative appearance in my preferred establishment. Is that a threat, Mr. Thompson?" "An observation." He leaned forward slightly. "You see, I've learned quite a bit about you these past weeks. Single mother, financial struggles, a history with an abusive partner. Tom, wasn't it? Several police reports filed and then mysteriously withdrawn." Ice flooded Emily's veins. Diana had warned her that Thompson would dig into her past, but hearing him speak Tom's name with such casual cruelty made her physically ill. "You've been investigating me," she managed, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Due diligence. I like to know who I'm dealing with." Thompson accepted his whiskey from the returning server without acknowledgement. "It's a pattern I've noticed. Your attraction to unstable, ultimately destructive relationships. First Tom, now James. What is it you want exactly?" Emily asked, desperate to redirect the conversation away from her past. Thompson smiled, a predator's smile. "Direct. I appreciate that. What I want is simple, for you to understand your position. James Harrington's company is weeks away from financial collapse. The only thing keeping his creditors at bay is the potential investment from my firm. An investment that is now in jeopardy due to his questionable hiring decisions. And you mean me? I mean his attempt to curry favor with me by offering employment to the woman I had justifiably removed from the sovereign, only to then renege on our investment discussions. Thompson sipped his whiskey. A miscalculation that will cost him everything unless rectified. Emily forced herself to hold his gaze. And what would rectification entail? Your immediate resignation from Verdant, a signed statement acknowledging inappropriate behavior on your part during our encounter here, and your permanent departure from New York. His tone was matter-of-fact, as if discussing a minor business transaction rather than the destruction of her life. And if I refuse, Thompson's smile widened fractionally, then James loses everything. His company, his reputation, his family's legacy, and you, well, your employment prospects in this industry would become non-existent. The apartment you can barely afford now would become impossible to maintain. Your son's medical needs, asthma, isn't it, would go unaddressed without insurance. The calculated cruelty of his research, the way he weaponized her vulnerabilities, sent a wave of nausea through Emily's body. You would destroy an entire company, dozens of jobs just to punish me for not picking up money you threw at me. I would demonstrate the consequences of disrespect. Thompson's voice hardened. The world operates on power, Ms. Matthews. I have it. You don't. James thought he could protect you. He can't. That's the reality you need to accept. Emily felt something shift inside her, fear transforming into white-hot fury. The reality I've accepted, she said, her voice surprisingly steady, is that men like you believe money equals impunity, that you can harm whoever you want, however you want, and face no consequences. A charming perspective, but ultimately irrelevant. You have until tomorrow to tender your resignation. After that, events will progress beyond your control. Thompson stood, straightening his immaculate suit. Consider your son's welfare before you make another impulsive decision. As he turned to leave, Emily spoke one last sentence. The sentence they had carefully crafted to provoke his most unguarded response. I wonder if your board would be interested in the recording of this conversation. Thompson froze, then slowly turned back. The mask of civility slipped, revealing something truly frightening beneath. He leaned down, his voice a venomous whisper, meant only for her ears. You stupid, pathetic woman. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? I own judges, I own politicians. One word from me, and Child Protective Services would find your apartment unsuitable for that brat of yours. One call and your medical records, including that convenient miscarriage last year, become public knowledge. One signature, and you'll never work again. Not just in restaurants, but anywhere. People who challenge me don't just lose, they disappear. He straightened, the mask of civilized businessmen sliding back into place so quickly, it was as if the previous moment had never happened. Good evening, Ms. Matthews. I look forward to receiving your resignation. After he returned to his table, Emily sat motionless, trembling so violently she feared she might shatter into pieces. There had been no miscarriage last year. Thompson had fabricated that detail, perhaps testing to see what she would correct. But the threats against Noah, the casual mention of owning judges and politicians, the naked malice in his eyes, all had been terrifyingly real. We got it, Diana whispered triumphantly through the earpiece. Every word clear as crystal. Emily, you did it. But Emily barely heard her. She was remembering Thompson's face in that unguarded moment, the absolute conviction that he could destroy her with impunity. The realization that even with this recording, with witnesses, with Diana's investigation, his power might still shield him from real consequences. Get out of there now, James's voice cut through her thoughts. He's watching you too closely. We have what we need. Emily rose on unsteady legs, leaving cash for her untouched sparkling water. She could feel Thompson's eyes on her back as she walked toward the exit, each step requiring conscious effort. Outside, the spring night air hit her lungs like a desperately needed tonic. James waited in a car across the street, Diana beside him, both watching the restaurant entrance with anxious expressions. Emily, Diana called as she approached. We got everything. The threats, the admission about judges and politicians. It's exactly what we needed. But Emily couldn't share their triumph. The baby was kicking frantically, responding to the adrenaline coursing through her system. Thompson's threats echoed in her mind, not just against her, but against Noah, against her unborn child. The absolute certainty in his voice when he spoke of making people disappear had chilled her to her core. "Emily!" James's concern penetrated her haze. "Are you all right?" "No," she whispered, tears finally breaking free. "I'm not all right. None of this is all right." Because even as she had obtained the evidence they needed, Emily had glimpsed the true extent of Thompson's power and ruthlessness. The battle they had just begun suddenly seemed impossible to win, and the consequences of losing were unthinkable. Dawn broke over the city, pale light filtering through the blinds of Diana's apartment where Emily had spent a sleepless night. The recording of Thompson's threats played on a loop in her mind, each repetition deepening her fear rather than alleviating it. In the kitchen, she could hear Diana and James speaking in urgent, hushed tones, planning their next moves while Emily sat frozen, one hand on her stomach, wondering if she had made a catastrophic mistake. "Flight confirmed," Diana said, entering the living room with her laptop. "Thompson's on his way to Tokyo as scheduled. 12-hour flight, which gives us the window we need." Emily looked up, eyes burning from exhaustion. "And then what?" "We release the recording and hope his empire crumbles overnight. You heard him. He owns judges, politicians, people who challenge him disappear." James sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "That's why we're not just releasing the recording." Diana's story includes financial documents showing irregular transfers to offshore accounts, testimony from 3 other women, and evidence of Thompson using company resources for personal vendetta campaigns. "We hit him from all sides simultaneously," Diana explained, her journalist's intensity sharpened by the proximity of her biggest story. "The recording is damning, but it's the combination of evidence that will make it impossible for him to dismiss or bury." Emily shook her head. "You don't understand. A man like Thompson doesn't just roll over because of a scandal. He'll fight back. He'll come after all of us, especially me and Noah. Which is why we've taken precautions," James assured her. "Noah is safe with my sister. I've hired private security for both locations, and we have a contingency plan if Thompson returns before the full impact of the story hits." Before Emily could respond, her phone rang, Sarah's name flashing on the screen. She answered with a sense of foreboding that had become all too familiar. "Emily?" Sarah's voice was tight with panic. "Something's wrong. Kevin just called me to come in immediately. Said it was an emergency. When I asked what kind, he just said to get here now." "Don't go," Emily said immediately. "It could be a trap. Thompson might have—" "I'm already here," Sarah interrupted. "And Emily, as there are police. They're confiscating computers, files. Kevin's being questioned in his office. I overheard one of the officers mention potential health code violations that could shut down the Sovereign permanently." Emily's eyes met Diana's across the room. "Thompson," she whispered. "He's making good on his threats already. But against the Sovereign? Why would he target his own favorite restaurant?" Diana frowned, typing rapidly on her laptop. Unless he's sending a message," James finished grimly, "showing what happens to places that employ people who cross him." Emily's phone buzzed with an incoming text. "Unknown number. Actions have consequences. The Sovereign is just the beginning. Resign, leave New York, or watch as everything around you burns." She showed the message to Diana and James, her hands shaking. "He knows. Somehow he knows we recorded him. This is just the first move." James took the phone, his expression darkening. "We need to accelerate the timeline. Diana, how soon can you publish? I need 6 hours minimum to verify final sources and get editorial approval. My editor is committed, but he won't go to print without everything triple-checked." Diana was already gathering her materials. "Thompson may be on a plane, but his organization isn't. They're clearly acting on predetermined orders." Emily's phone rang again, Mrs. Chen's number. Her heart nearly stopped. "Hello? Emily. Mrs. Chen's normally calm voice sounded frightened. "Strange men asking questions in building, showing your picture, saying they from immigration but no badges. I not answer door." Cold terror washed over Emily. Thompson had found Mrs. Chen. How long? Before he traced Noah to Connecticut. "Don't open the door to anyone," she instructed, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I'm sending someone to get you right away." After hanging up, Emily turned to James, panic rising in her throat. "He's sending people to my apartment building. Looking for me, for Noah. This isn't just about intimidation anymore. He's actively hunting us." "I'll send my security team for Mrs. Chen," James promised, already making the call. "We'll bring her here where it's safe." But was anywhere truly safe? The question haunted Emily as the hours crept by. Mrs. Chen arrived, shaken but unharmed. Sarah reported that the Sovereign had been temporarily closed, pending a health department investigation. Diana worked feverishly on her story, triple-checking sources, preparing for publication, and through it all, the texts continued to arrive on Emily's phone, each one more specific, more threatening than the last. Noah looks happy playing in the garden at James's sister's house. Blue shirt suits him. Connecticut is lovely this time of year, especially Westport. Ultrasounds at 28 weeks show so much detail, boy or girl. Either way, better hope stress doesn't cause complications. Each message sent Emily spiraling deeper, into terror. Thompson wasn't just threatening anymore. He was demonstrating his reach, showing her that nowhere was beyond his influence, that no one she loved was truly safe. He has people watching Noah, she whispered, showing James the latest message. He knows exactly where he is. James immediately called his sister, instructing her to take Noah and leave immediately for a different location, a cabin in the Adirondacks owned by a friend, paid for in cash with no paper trail. We're moving too slowly, Emily said, pacing. Diana's living room, despite her exhaustion. Every hour gives him more time to find us, to hurt the people I love. 2 more hours, Diana promised, not looking up from her laptop. My editor is reviewing the final copy now. Once it's published, it can't be buried. But would it be enough? The doubt gnawed at Emily like a physical pain. Even with the recording, the financial documents, the testimonies, would it be enough to stop someone with Thompson's wealth and connections? As if in answer to her unspoken question, her phone rang again. An unknown number. Emily stared at it, her hand trembling. Put it on speaker, Diana instructed, pressing record on her own device. Emily answered, her voice barely audible. Hello, Ms. Matthews. Thompson's voice smooth and controlled as ever. I believe my messages have made my position clear, yet I see no resignation letter, no indication that you're preparing to leave New York. How are you calling? You're supposed to be on a plane to Tokyo. A soft chuckle. Private jets offer certain flexibilities commercial travel does not. I've postponed my trip to handle this situation personally. The implication sent ice through Emily's veins. Thompson hadn't left. He was still in New York, actively directing the campaign against her. What do you want? She asked, though she already knew the answer. I want you to understand that this ends only one way. Your choice is merely whether the collateral damage includes your son, your unborn child, your elderly neighbor, your friend Sarah, James Harrington's sister, and anyone else unfortunate, enough to be connected to you. Thompson's voice remained perfectly calm, as if discussing the weather. The recording you made changes nothing. Release it, and watch how quickly it's discredited, dismissed as the desperate fabrication of a mentally unstable woman with a history of making false accusations. Emily's eyes widened. He was referring to the police reports she had filed against Tom, reports she had ultimately withdrawn when Tom threatened to seek custody of Noah. I've made preparations for every contingency, Ms. Matthews, including the excellent Ms. Porter's forthcoming exposé. By this time tomorrow, her credibility will be in tatters, her sources recanting, her editor facing a career-ending lawsuit. Diana's face drained of color, but she continued recording, her jaw set with determination. You can't silence everyone, Emily said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. The truth has a way of coming out. A charming sentiment. Utterly naive, but charming, Thompson sighed. I've built my empire by understanding a fundamental truth about human nature. Everyone has a price. Everyone can be bought, intimidated, or destroyed. Even you, Ms. Matthews, especially you. The call ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Emily sank onto the couch, the full weight of what they were facing crushing down on her. He knows everything, she whispered. Every move we make, every plan we form, he's always one step ahead. Diana looked up from her computer, her expression grim but resolute. Not anymore. The story just went live. It's on the Tribune's front page, with the recording embedded. Twitter is already exploding. Emily stared at her, unable to process the sudden shift. But he said he was bluffing, James interrupted, looking at his phone, trying to intimidate us into backing down. But he's too late. The story is already trending. Thompson Tapes is the top hashtag nationwide. For a brief, dizzying moment, Emily allowed herself to hope. Could it really be that simple? Thompson exposed, his threats neutralized by public scrutiny, justice finally within reach. Then her phone buzzed one final time. The message contained only an address, James's sister's house in Connecticut, and a single line: last chance. End this now, or what happens next is on your conscience. The fragile hope shattered, replaced by pure, primal terror. Noah. Despite the precautions, despite James's sister taking him to the cabin, Thompson knew, and he was making his final move. Emily looked up at James and Diana, her decision already made. I have to go to Noah, now. The battle for justice had just become a desperate race to save her son. 3 years after that fateful night, Emily Matthews stood on a stage in Washington, D.C., addressing a packed auditorium of women's rights advocates, labor organizers, and journalists. Her story had become a national touchstone, a pregnant waitress who stood up to one of America's most powerful men and won, not just for herself, but for thousands of service workers who had since come forward with their own stories of workplace abuse, creating a movement that had transformed labor regulations in the hospitality industry. Richard Thompson's empire had crumbled spectacularly after the Thompson tapes went viral, followed by SEC investigations, shareholder revolts, and criminal charges for witness intimidation and financial fraud. His attempt to reach Noah that night had failed. James's security team intercepted Thompson's men before they could reach the cabin, providing the final piece of evidence that eventually put him behind bars. Now, with 7-year-old Noah watching, proudly from the front row and her 2-year-old daughter on her hip, Emily had transformed her suffering into purpose as the executive director of Serving with Dignity, a national advocacy organization fighting for workplace protections. But the journey wasn't just about taking down a powerful bully, it was about reclaiming dignity, finding inner strength, and building a better future. As Emily concluded her speech, she looked directly into the camera live streaming the event. The most dangerous mistake powerful people make is believing their wealth makes them untouchable. But the human spirit is stronger than money, stronger than influence, stronger than fear. When we stand together, when we refuse to remain silent, we create a power that no individual, no matter how wealthy, can ever defeat. Your voice matters, your dignity matters, and no one, absolutely no one, has the right to take that away from you. The audience rose in a standing ovation, but Emily's attention was fixed on Noah's beaming face as he clapped with fierce pride. The journey had been brutal, filled with moments of terror and despair, but it had led to this moment of triumph, proving that sometimes justice does come, not through resignation to the established order, but through the courage to challenge,